From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Chris. G'day, mate. Let's turn our focus to Cyclone Jasper. In the past hour, it has crossed the coast. The areas that are deeply affected, checking the latest rain map in front of me here, is everything from Cooktown in the far north, even rain being felt down in Innisfail, but in and around Cairns, Port Douglas, this is our particular focus right now. The latest that we have from Sky News Weather is...
Tropical Cyclone Jasper is making landfall as we go live to air this evening. It's a Category 2 system. The eye of the storm is currently moving over Wujal, just north of Cape Tribulation. The warning zone of Cape Melville to Cardwell is seeing intense rainfall and destructive wind gusts. Emergency services are advising residents do not venture outside if you find yourself in the eye of the cyclone. Remain in a secure shelter.
Now, this is all happening as we speak. Let's check with two people who represent the communities that are most likely to be most affected by what's happening, including the Mayor of Cairns, who joins us right now, Terry James. Terry, nice to see you, mate. What's the latest that you're feeling and seeing with your own eyes?
Well, you've come across to Michael. I'm actually the Mayor of Douglas, but I can tell you right now that we're certainly copping and bashing at the moment as far as wind and rain goes. Wind especially, we've got a lot of gusts coming through, and we've lost some really big trees within our region, especially one in Main Street and McCrossan Street. One of our large trees in the centre there has come down. So there's going to be a fair bit of clean-up happening over the next few days. So, of course, Michael Kerr is the Mayor of Port Douglas. Give us an idea about preparation. Obviously, you were trying to tell people who needed to move, otherwise for people to stay where they needed to stay. Because it's all happening right now, you don't have people out and about. But tell us where people are if they're gathered anywhere in and around Port Douglas. Yeah, one good thing about these things is that you get plenty of notice. So for the last few days, we've been making sure that residents have been doing the right thing by getting sandbags if they're in a flood-prone area, and also clearing their backyards to make sure that any debris, anything that could be a flying missile, if the wind catches it, is taken out of their backyards. And that's really important because that's where a lot of the damage comes from, except for the trees, of course. When the trees come down, we can't really prevent that. But the locals have done the right thing. They've done their process to ensure that we're going to be ready for this hitting. And as I said, tomorrow and the next day will be the cleanup after this moves on.
So is your expectation for anyone who might be watching a Sky News Regional, Foxtel or Flash, that even if it feels like things are calming down, don't be heading out tonight, wait for the sun to come up tomorrow morning?
Absolutely. The worst thing they can do is put themselves in danger by going outside now and being a tourist and looking around at things. Stay inside. That is the most important thing, where you're safe inside. And then once you're told that it's safe to go out, please, that's when you go out and start doing the cleanup.
Good on you, Michael. Do appreciate it. Let's go to Cairns right now. And Terry James, who is the Mayor of Cairns. Tell us, what are you feeling right now, mate? What are you seeing out the window? What are you getting as information to the council?
Paul, it's not too bad in Cairns. We're a bit further south than Mayor Kerr. Of course, the cyclone crossed around Woodville, and they've copped the brunt of it up there. So it's quite good in Cairns at the moment. We've got rain, we've got some gusts, of course, and we've got a lot of trees down. And, of course, the big thing is there's about 18,000 homes that have lost their power. So it's the rain that's going to affect us, and that's what we're really waiting on now.
So what are the indications about how much rain? Thankfully, a little bit of bullet dodge in terms of the wind, fingers crossed. But what are you hearing about how much rain there is?
We're hearing anywhere between 400 to 500 millimetres. We haven't seen that yet, so hopefully they're correct and it's still on its way, but we're not actually seeing that in Cairns at the moment. Right, so a little calm before things. What's your advice to locals about the next couple of hours? Exactly the same as Mayor Kerr. Stay at home. Stay safe until this thing passes, because there's a lot of rain out there and there's trees down. There's likely to be power lines down as well, so just stay home until it's safe. And best thing to wake up in the morning and then reassess the situation then. Yeah, from council, you're a big part of clean-up. Obviously, there's SES, some state government support as well. But how many people will you have on this tomorrow? We've got our full crew ready to go, Paul. They're just assessing the situation right now, and when it dies right down, we will actually start as soon as we can. But we've got crews coming up from south to help us in terms of ergon. That's the biggest one. SES have got plenty more crews that arrived in town, so I don't think there's any shortage of manpower, so we'll get Cairns back online very quick.
It's a beautiful part of the world. Look forward to visiting again very soon. All the best to you, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. And again, to everyone in and around Port Douglas and those areas a little further north, strength and love to everyone. More information, of course, on our weather channel, which is in full rolling coverage right now. We'll cross to a reporter in the region a little bit later in the show. But as you know, just a little bit of news around tonight that we should be talking about as well, which includes the garbage, the hot wind that was coming out of the Treasurer today. The Treasurer telling us in the mid-year economic financial update thing, basically sort of the halfway budget, that yet again everything is awesome. Here's what he had to say. After getting very close to a surplus, they will deliver a surplus by this time in May.
We will consider the budget conditions and the economic conditions between now and the May budget to see whether we will provide more cost of living help. But I say to every Australian under cost of living pressure right now, one of the best ways that we can get downward pressure on inflation, which is smashing household budgets, is to provide the kind of responsible economic management which is a feature of this budget update.
It's garbage. As I've told you many times before, they end up with extra money. I'll explain how much extra money they get, and it's all thanks to you. You struggle, they turn around and say, sorry, but we'll keep taxing you up the nose. The media, of course, desperate to find the narrative that the government is turning things around after the bad couple of months. Well, they're off and racing.
An unexpected tax windfall has put federal Labor closer to delivering another budget surplus.
Rising wages, falling inflation and a better budget bottom line. That's the verdict as the Treasurer gave his mid-year economic update.
The likely plan, that deficit does become a second surplus in the May budget with more cost of living relief then, just in time for the next election.
So, of course, all politics, nothing to do with the reality of what you are feeling right now. And this is why people can smell that this thing is, frankly, a bit of a con. Now, let's go through exactly how they ended up getting more revenue than they expected. Unsurprisingly, it comes from tax. And the biggest source of tax for the federal government, it is your average worker. In fact, the best part of an extra $62 billion came their way. And that's why they're now starting to feel that they're getting closer and closer to an inevitable second budget surplus. But again, you don't care whether the government makes a surplus or not. The reality is that you want some cost of living relief, or you want the government to find ways to take its foot off your neck, particularly when it comes to taxes. Now, again, from the Sydney Morning Herald to the Australian, you can see here that taxes was the issue. Reading from one of the accounts, the improvement has been largely driven by much stronger tax collections. This year alone, the government has upgraded its revenue forecast to $328 billion. $328 billion that they are expecting to come via the taxation that comes from you working like a million people are 2 jobs. From the best part of 16, 17 million people working their normal 40 hours a week. Someone working for themselves, the quarterly basses. Tax, tax, tax. All at a time when the government thinks that it knows how to spend your money better than you do, when you need more of your money than ever before because everything costs more. And then there's, of course, company taxes. Everything from the biggest of businesses to the smallest of ABNs. Company tax collections have been revised up by $10 billion, or should I say $9.2 billion, to a record $137 billion. So remember, taxation revenue $328 billion from workers, $139 billion from companies. It is unbelievable. Now, meantime, of course, into the Ford estimates, they think that the numbers might work their way as well, but you don't care about that. Why? Because the Australian and the Guardian have actually seen through the games of Jim Chalmers. They can see through the games as to who is actually playing here in the Australian. In an inflation crisis, Labor is now squeezing middle Australia for budget repair, and even the Turnbull Times notices it. The federal budget improvement is good news for Jim Chalmers, but households still face the squeeze. Now, we have been told how many times, over how many months, that apparently the number one focus of the government was the same focus as the citizens who are being taxed harder and heavier than ever before.
These cost of living pressures are still our biggest challenge.
Cost of living pressures. facing Australian families, because that is, of course, the number one issue that the government is focused on.
We continue to have as our number one priority cost of living relief. Our government understands the cost of living is the number one pressure on Australian families, which is why help with the cost of living is our number one priority.
The government is focused on this cost of living challenge in the economy.
So help me out. The two opportunities for the government to spend money to help people through things like reducing the amount of their surplus to pay for things like fuel tax reductions are in the budget or the mid-year economic review. We have now had both and they receive nothing for the middle class. Instead, the decisions that have been made by this government add to the extra pressures that overall lead to the tax burden, including, remember what they have introduced. They have introduced new taxes on heavy vehicle haulage, meaning everything in the shop costs more because the federal government is increasing the tax on the trucks that move it around. Oh, and by the way, if you're in regional areas and you're on a farm, you already know that you're having to pay extra quarantine taxes. And now we learn that Labor has actually changed the thresholds for household allowances when it comes to farms if you're in financial difficulties. You see, they know that most likely the people in regional Australia don't vote Labor, so you will be whacked yet again with the government finding a way to make your life harder. And then, in the very same budget where they're trying to say it's our economic responsibility and we've done everything right, please, sir, may I have some more cost of living relief? No. They're treating you like Oliver. They're increasing the cost when it comes to getting a passport because, God forbid, you'd like to leave the country. Maybe be able to go on a holiday sometime soon. Now, it's not a huge amount of money, but again, these are all just the little ways they tick up their revenue. Tick up, tick up, tick up, tick up, tick up. So they end up with hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. Now, also, a little change here too. If you're somebody who's got a hybrid car or is trying to buy one of the bigger versions of the hybrid cars because maybe you'd like to get you around with your kids, you've got a bigger family, maybe even you'd like to tow something in a hybrid, well, guess what? There's a new tax on that as well. So all of these people are getting close to a surplus. But I'll tell you how they're getting close to a surplus, because they are inventing new taxes and more people are paying existing taxes. Nothing is happening when it comes to government spending. They are not finding new sources of responsibility inside their own actions. No, they're just finding ways to make you pay, slowly but surely. Again, particularly pernicious is the decision to ramp a tax over the next few years over those heavy vehicles. It means everything that's transported in the country will end up costing more, while the government does nothing about fuel tax for the people who put fuel in those trucks or you in your car. And then they turn around and, as I say, they have now put luxury car taxes on family-friendly hybrids. Now, I thought we were supposed to be saving the atmosphere. Oh, no, it's only electric cars. But if you want to go for a car that will charge its battery by moving its axles via a hybrid car, meaning you go further and you use less fuel, you will now pay an extra tax. And I remember the crap that they were spinning the past couple of days, that magically they've done something special with $10 billion worth of spending that was being spun by their mates in the lefty media. The $10 billion worth of spending cuts were all about fighting inflation. Well, devil in the detail. 3/4 of that headline is rubbish. You see, 3/4 of the Treasurer's $9.8 billion in budget cuts is coming from pushing spending on major road or rail projects beyond the 4-year forecasts. They have not cut spending. They have not changed anything apart from how it appears on the books. So they're still promising to upgrade a road. It will now just have to wait another 4 or 5 years. We're off into the never-never. And they want to turn around and pretend that they're doing something about the federal budget, give us a gold star. When the people who are hurting right now, the people who are hurting as a result of cost of living, are being told by a government for, 363 days of the year, cost of living's the main focus. But then for the other 2 days, to get us to 365 days, when they're actually in a position to announce something, they announce nothing. These people are playing the country for fools. Most of the media is now invested in trying to pretend that the end of the year is not as bad as it looked a couple of weeks ago and the government will bounce back next year. Well, I'm pretty sure that you and I know that when things are getting financially worse, yet the government is getting richer because of the amount of tax that it is taking or new taxes that it is inventing, people will not be handing out gold stars. They will see the government for what it is, an operation that is desperate to produce surpluses, not because it's good for the economy or not because we're paying off debt, but because they then can turn around and say at the next election, we're great on the economy because look at the surpluses that we built. Yet the pain that went into the building of those surpluses, apparently you're too stupid to remember your own circumstances. They promised at the last election that everything would be cheaper under a Labor government, that they would do something about cost of living. They have now done nothing twice this year when they're in a position to do so for the middle class. Nothing. Now, if you happen to qualify for some childcare stuff or you happen to be towards the minimum wage, there's a little for you. But these are the same people who in May of this year took $1,500 off you as a guaranteed tax return. These are the people who have stood by and watched petrol go up and up and up and up. Your power bills go up and up and up and up. And nothing is being done to help the consumer at the other end of things. Nothing. And to give you an idea about just how many people are hurting right now in Australia, the people who are being metaphorically given the middle finger by the Canberra Club, well, finder.com.au today has released quite a shocking survey suggesting that a third of the country doesn't have any money in the bank. Apparently the average for people who have got some money in the bank is about $12,000. Now, while $12,000 sounds like an awful lot of money, you throw in a couple of car repairs or some interest rate rises, guess what? It all disappears. But for a massive section of Australians, they've got nothing. Nothing. This is all because of interest rates, skyrocketing rents, which are punching holes in people's wallets. Finder.com.au revealed that 1 in 3 Australians do not have a dollar for emergency services to their name. But the government's got plenty. And the government thinks that you should thank them because they are finding new ways to tax you, either directly or indirectly, so they can try to fool you at a federal election that everything is amazing. It's not. Remember, the projections of this government for the intergenerational report that was put out by Jim Chalmers was that we will have deficits every year for the next 40 years. Now, we're going to go from having a larger surplus this year because of mining taxes and obviously also the counting of the profits from the Future Fund. They will slowly get themselves over the line with a surplus again next year. And then, as you know, we're off to an early election because that's what every first-term government does. In the meantime, the actual future for Australia, as predicted by Treasury, is deficits that grow and grow and grow for the next 40 freaking years. And believe it or not, Jim Chalmers, again, trying to lie to people that he's doing something magical about inflation that no other country's able to do.
One of the really encouraging things about our cost of living help is that the ABS tells us it's making a positive difference to inflation. Whether it's rent, electricity bills, early childhood education, the ABS has made it very clear that our cost of living relief is taking some of the edge off these cost of living pressures rather than adding to inflation, and that's what we designed it to do.
Now again, let's look at data. I try to show you the receipts to give you the information behind the opinion that forms the argument, and arguments that have got the data behind them are very difficult to dismiss. This bloke pretending that they're doing something on inflation. Now let's be very clear. Remember, while the average rate of inflation for Australia is about 5.4%, power bills are the best part of 20%, petrol the best part of 10%. Things like food and rent way above this average. But let's look at the averages. Australia's inflation rate is currently higher than the UK, Singapore, France, Germany, Canada, South Korea, Spain, the United States, Taiwan, Japan, Italy, Switzerland, Belgium and the Netherlands. That's the reality, that we are currently running 15th out of those 15 countries. Also, if you believe the Treasury projections, The suggestion is that we don't get anywhere near where the Reserve Bank needs us to go until the financial year of 2025-26. They are playing us for idiots, but we're not. We see them, we see what they're doing, and they are managing the politics, the headlines, where the reality for the average Australian, the average tax-paying Australian, earning average wage with a small amount of money in the bank, taxes increase, direct and indirect. The largest source of revenue to this government is you. Meantime, we have the absurdity of a scenario where one of the only reasons they're able to get near a surplus to be proud of is because of the money that we make in this country out of the exporting of fossil fuels. You know it, I know it, and the Treasurer well and truly knows it. But Chris Bowen, as you know, is off there buggerising around with the rest of them at the COP meeting in the UAE, where he, among other things, has been saying over the past couple of days that we should be getting rid of fossil fuels. This is the genius who believes that Australia should go into permanent deficit so the country that produces 1% and a bit of the world's climate emissions can look good at international conferences. Here again is this idiot. Remember, he is talking about what props up the budget.
If we are to keep 1.5 degrees alive, fossil fuels has no ongoing role to play in our energy systems. And I speak as the Climate and Energy Minister of one of the world's largest fossil fuel exporters.
No wonder I have often spoken about the leader of this government as each way elbow. Is there a more perfect example than that? On the international stage, let's get rid of fossil fuels. Back here in Australia, thank God for fossil fuels because we tax them up the yin-yang. We tax the mining sector equally, and that means we get to give ourselves a gold star for a budget surplus. These people literally are pushing in both directions. And we again are going to be the ones paying the bill, let alone an energy transition process that will cost $1 trillion. That's Green Group's telling us that it's going to cost $1 trillion. Bowen has turned around and openly admitted that to get 32 extra gigawatts of renewable energy into the system to move away from fossil fuels is going to cost, if it's based off anywhere near about 1 and a bit gigawatts that they gave to New South Wales, the best part of $60 billion. Oh, but none of that's in the budget. You see, it's off budget. And you're never going to get to know what that spending is because it's commercial in confidence. There is so much off budget now that it is a rort in and of itself that they are not talking about it. We still have to borrow money to pay for it, but it doesn't turn up in the politics of budget night or the mid-year economic review. Fair dinkum, these people. Now, speaking of, can we talk about Albo's 3 useless amigos? Because there's a bit more on them tonight as well, believe it or not. Of course, we're talking here about Claire O'Neill, QC Doofus, and the idiot Adam Giles. They are the useless amigos who have done such damage to Australia when it comes to the borders. Well, I bet you didn't hear this today, but guess what? A 7th detainee is now expected to become somebody that will end up interacting with the police for accused crimes. 7. Now what, there's 140 that of course came out? It is just, again, madness. Oh, but they want credit because this week they've announced that there'll be a special panel of people that will be having a look at everything. Well, I'll give you the tip. This stuff is weeks after the High Court made its decision. The press gallery turns around and wants to give the government again another big cuddle because, oh, they passed legislation. Legislation, by their own admission, will not put more than 2, 3 or 4 of these people back into immigration detention. Now, there is something very weird at the heart of this government. We're seeing it with the way they fiddle the books, fudge the borders, and take you for granted. Well, thankfully, we stay on the case. We fire up. And I promise you, every day we'll be doing it. And I don't care what the rest of the media says is the story of the day. The behaviour and deceit of this government is the story of the day because it affects normal people like yourself, and I won't take it sitting down. All right, keen to know what you think. Send me an email, paul@skynews.com.au. Quick break, back with more. Plenty to talk about with Joe Hildebrand and with Bronwyn Bishop. We'll go back to the front of Cyclone Jasper as we start to get a picture of what's going on, and the great Megan Kelly as well tonight, all on Paul Murray Live. They have gone head-to-head, toe-to-toe, heart-to-heart, all the way through this year. So let us finish the final example of them on a Wednesday. None other than the wonderful Bronwyn Bishop and Joe Hildebrand. They'll be back next year doing exactly the same thing, but still, here we are, just
That's
before
right.
we all...
And we share a heart, don't we, Bronwyn?
Isn't that lovely?
Absolutely,
we're having a bit of a heart-to-heart.
We're having the heart-to-heart.
That's right.
But when it comes to cold, hard policy...
You pull out a...
You have to take...
Might go slightly.
That's right.
All right, quickly, because I obviously went through it in chapter and verse. The fiddle that we got with the books today, again, for 363 days, they tell you cost of living front and centre, that's all we care about. And on budget day, and now sort of mini budget day, which frankly, again, only super nerds care about, nothing. Right? Nothing. Instead, they actually introduced new taxes on both of those occasions. And again, the largest source of revenue to the government is the average citizen.
That's right.
Yet they, again, want a gold star for this achievement.
Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that governments shy away from the question of increasing the GST is it's much easier to raise more money from bracket creep. And so it just becomes a perpetuating thing. So when you see that the government went in and said, oh, we're there to push wages up, that simply means more tax in their pocket because they're pushed into another tax bracket. And as I keep saying again and again, how well you're doing is not the size of the pay packet, it's what you can buy with the pay packet. And so you've got people who have had, according to the Treasurer, we've put wages up and we've done great things for workers. The worker is worse off because what they've done is increase inflation or keep pushing it to the level it's at. And as a result, they buy less. They can buy less with the money that they take home.
Well, also, I mean, as I mentioned here before, right, reality of inflation, right, is that Australia is running 15th out of the countries about headline inflation, right?
Yep.
We're at 5.5. The US is at 3.2. And remember, our Reserve Bank says it's got to be between 2 and 3. Also buried inside the numbers today was an expectation about unemployment increasing, where we could end up with another 100,000 people ending up on the unemployment queue. Now, they tried this trick at the last in the last budget, saying it had to go up to 4.5%. It's still remaining solidly under 3. So whether that comes about or not. But I tell you what, good luck spinning. You're paying more tax than ever before, and if we're right, 100,000 people will lose their job. How good are we? Good luck.
Let's just unpick some of this. Firstly, people are not paying more tax than ever before. There are more workers than ever before, and that is why the government is getting more taxation revenue. I have my go. No, and the stage 3 tax cuts are coming in next year, and so they will be paying less tax, and they will be addressing bracket keep. So they're actually going through with all those things that are doing.
The stage 3 tax cuts are for. It's the third tranche, and it's for the higher income earners.
80 grand and up.
It doesn't affect the
80 grand and up. You don't think 80 grand and up is middle Australia?
There are plenty of people.
Good luck surviving on 80 grand in this environment.
There are plenty of people who are earning 70 grand a year.
Yes, that's
Hundreds of thousands.
So why don't we abolish the top end? So you want the stage 3 tax cuts for the top end to instead go to lower income earners. That is the position of the Greens and the Labor left.
That is not what I'm arguing.
Well, what are you complaining? You're complaining about middle Australia.
I'm simply pointing
80 grand a year and up is quintessentially middle Australia, and they are proceeding with that. And the reason they are getting more taxation revenue is because there are more workers in the workforce than ever before. They're not putting tax hikes on. These are just facts, Bronwyn. These are absolute facts. And the other part of the money they're getting is from more company tax, from more companies raking in more money because the economy post-COVID...
Particularly on coal sales, which of course Mr. Manic Bowen wants to completely phase out.
You could park a dump truck full of cash on your front lawn and you would say, well, where am I meant to park that?
Yeah, but it is
the gymnastics to spin...
You've got a schizophrenic government.
Yeah.
It's split like this on the...
So if Bowen wins in Cabinet, we get rid of fossil fuels, right? All right.
No, Charlie, not at all.
Which,
No, that's
hang on.
not true.
So what did he advocate to? What did he say at COP? What did he agree to that they signed this week to move away from it?
To move away, not eradicate it.
His position is to eradicate.
He said it had to be nil. He wanted it abolished.
There are going to be coal exports from here until Kingdom Come, until the last country on earth stops selling coal. We will still be selling coal, and there will still be gas in Australia.
They said no, and so they put out this, pardon the expression, pisswick statement at the end.
We're working blue tonight. Fish.
Well,
Bronwyn's working blue.
I'm going to tell Angela
I finally broke her. All right. Now, let's talk today about the decision of Australia to vote with a majority of countries at the United Nations for a ceasefire. Now, in fairness to the resolution is very clear that all the hostages should be released. But it doesn't go as far as saying Hamas should hand down all of its guns and all of its power in Gaza. But it's very obviously a change. It's one heck of a pivot now to basically suggest that Hamas will end up with the moral victory because they stay in power, but Israel would have to stop dropping bombs trying to get rid of them. Here in part is what Penny Wong had to say about this.
Australia shares the grave concerns that I have articulated previously about the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. Human suffering is widespread and it is unacceptable.
Now I'm going to drop an inconvenient truth on the table. Did you know that more than 200,000 civilians died in a best part of 20-year war in Iraq? Was there a demand for such a ceasefire? No. Did the Australian government bend to such a ceasefire? No. Are innocent civilians getting absolutely pummeled in Gaza? Bloody oath. No question, no mucking around with all of that, right? But how is it a scenario where much of the Western world, and literally Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the Prime Ministers got together and demanded that this was the position that should be in, when all three of those countries were part of a war that killed 200,000 civilians?
I watched Wong today in disgust. Absolute disgust. That motion was moved by Iran and Syria. The amendment was moved by the United States and Austria. They didn't get the 3/4 of percentage required for the amendment to pass. So instead of either voting against the original motion, as the United States did, or abstaining, as did the United Kingdom, and indeed did our Pacific neighbours. And did you know that Papua New Guinea has actually opened an embassy in Jerusalem?
Really?
We took ours out, but Papua New Guinea has done so. But aside from that, we then vote with Russia, who's killing Ukrainians. Where's the demand for a ceasefire there, hey? We vote with the sort of people who have been passing resolutions against Israel almost since its inception. I watched Wong with utter contempt, and I have even more contempt for the Prime Minister, who has not got the guts to try and come out and give strong leadership on this issue, and lets them all play these the Palestinian supporters are in the Labor seats and they're playing to a domestic agenda, not to the international question at all, or what is the correct position for Australia to take.
Well, of course, Prime Minister...
It's just disgusting.
Exactly as I predicted, missing for a few days, early summer holiday. No doubt he'll be popping back up.
Well, he couldn't have COVID, could he? He used to do that in the lead up.
Joe, again, I think that you can be a supporter of the right of Israel to exist, but also to say, OK, at what point is the avenging of October the 7th verging on too much, right? However, if the stated objective is to get rid of Hamas, and the Australian position with the majority of the UN now is that Hamas will stay, and Israel will just have to suck it up that the people who have promised to do October the 7th again and again and again, well, they will stay in power in Gaza.
Yeah, well, certainly, and I know you didn't intend it like this, but this isn't Israel avenging what happened on October the 7th. This is Israel removing the threat of it happening again. This is not a form of collective punishment, as some people say. This is about removing what Israel did not think was as big a threat to it as subsequently it turned out to be.
Which we did in
Israel
Afghanistan,
actually tolerated
and they did in Iraq for 20 years.
From Hamas again and again and again.
Yeah.
And because Israel had better equipment or whatever, often the casualties were higher on that side. But it was always Hamas, firing these rockets from behind the cover of civilian, often medical and educational facilities. So there's that. The second thing is, I think that, of course, none of us want to see civilian casualties, and that is absolutely appalling. But again, when Hamas are using civilians and civilian installations deliberately as human shields, and according to some sources...
So why do you think we didn't sit it out like the UK?
I think we've been played off a break, and I think it is very difficult, unless you've really got your head in this story, it is very difficult to look at a motion that says we call for an urgent ceasefire so that we can, get humanitarian aid into civilians. I mean, you look at that on paper, and of course, who could possibly argue against it? The fact, of course, that's been, backed by Iran and, literally the cast of sort of supervillains of international affairs should tell you something. The other thing, of course, is it's Israel on the offensive. So it's always, when it's Israel's on the offensive, when it's Israel's turn to counterattack, that's when the calls for the ceasefire come.
100%.
The other thing I would simply say is, let's talk about Yemen.
Yes.
Where are all the protests about what's happening in Yemen?
Correct.
The casualties there are multiple times higher, plenty of civilians there, and yet there's no marching in the streets. So yet again, I think, and I'm listening to yet another podcast about the Holocaust, but seriously, whenever Jews are involved, and this is, saying you're against Israeli, but really it's Jews, there is this particular level of venom and hatred that immediately springs to the surface. And it is just staggering. I mean, you might get sort of lefty wankers hanging around saying Saudi Arabia is terrible or whatever, but you do not get scenes where people are jumping up and down in front of the Opera House saying, kill the Saudis, gas the Saudis, F the Saudis.
And don't get me wrong, I'm
phenomenal.
completely aware of the intelligence failure. I'm completely aware of the 6 hours to respond. I'm completely aware of the country almost tearing itself apart because of the Supreme Court changes. I'm completely aware of how precarious BB's leadership is. But all of that said, it is astonishing that Australia decided to line up with those countries as it did. And then we'll turn around and head to the region, and then the story will become about whether Israel accepts or will try to turn away somebody who's voted like that. I want to ask you, I'm going to get to, actually, let's do a bold prediction. All right, we'll move to that because we could spend 4 minutes of just going very quickly, but I want to say something to both of you in a second. But Joe, a bold prediction for next year. What do you guarantee with your heart and soul will happen?
Things will get better. Things will get better because 2023...
The West Tigers, because we've got a new board?
Has managed the incredible achievement of being just a dog of a year for everybody. I mean, if you look at the cost of living stuff, we're all going backwards. I think they did a poll which found something like over 80% of people thought they were doing worse off. I'm surprised the number is that low. Hopefully we will not get an interest rate for the entirety of calendar year 2024. Even if you look at something like the Voice referendum, which obviously I was sorry to lose, but it's not like the no votes were big winners. They were pissed off that their time was wasted and the amount of money went into it and whatever. So that was an incredible result that managed to both not achieve anything for the people who wanted
Australian
it.
People
but
$450 million to get nowhere.
And again, they were obviously for a government that was doing pretty well, I think, had a pretty long honeymoon period. The wheels got pretty wobbly over the last couple of months. So politically speaking, I'm going with, is it Yaz and the Plastic Factory?
The only way is up.
Only get better. The only way is up.
That was it. All right, Bronwyn, your bold prediction for next year, please.
The nuclear debate will really pick up because this cost and destruction of agricultural land by trying to build a new grid is just going to tear the country apart. And so the nuclear debate, which will say that the modular units can go in the footprint of the existing coal-fired power stations and use the old grid, will be a major political issue in the new year.
Good stuff. Merry Christmas,
Fantastic.
Happy Hanukkah, all the rest of it to both of you. I love you both. I love how honest you are. I love how fearless you are both on the air, and I look forward to celebrating exactly the same as things probably don't get better.
I love you both like my father and mother.
Hang on!
There,
how did you become my kid?
I said it. You told me to be honest. That's just how I feel.
You're older than I am. All right, quick break. Back with more. We're going to go live into very close to the eye of the storm of Cyclone Jasper and Megan Kelly, a natural force all of her own. Next here on Paul Murray Live.
Go.
Cyclone Jasper is currently belting Far North Queensland. In Far North Queensland right now for Sky News Weather is Bradlyn Oakes. She works for, of course, Sky News Weather. She's in Cairns right now, but the issues are a little further north. So what's the latest that we're hearing?
Well, Cyclone Jasper is currently making landfall. Now, the eye of the storm was moving over Wujal just really over the last hour or so, making landfall as a Category 2 tropical cyclone and bringing all of the hazards with it. So we've really seen the heavy rain start building and building more throughout the day today, and this will continue through the overnight hours. You can see all the rain that is around me currently in Cairns. Many areas since 9 a.m. this morning reporting totals over 50 millimeters, and I'm even seeing some of the heaviest rain that I've seen so far today coming down right now. As for the winds, many areas seeing gusts over 80 kilometers per hour. Destructive winds very likely on the southern side of this system with gusts over 100, 120 kilometers per hour, and we've already seen that as the system does make landfall. Now, in addition to this, we've been seeing many areas in Cairns where the roads have been flooded, highways closed in Far North Queensland, including part of the Captain Cook Highway, and we have been seeing large storm swells and waves and storm surges, especially in more coastal areas. It's a very hazardous situation, and thousands of people are currently without power. Emergency services have over 100 personnel in Far North Queensland that are ready to respond to any sort of emergency situation. They're stationed in many different areas. And in addition to that, we have emergency alerts in effect for many communities, including Cairns, where it's a seek shelter through the night tonight as the system does continue to intensify.
All right, I've got 30 seconds before I've got to talk to Megan Kelly in the United States. But when you talk about the winds on the southern side, are you talking about literally the areas that are closer and down towards Cairns? Or as the eye moves in, the southern side means basically in the next couple of hours is when the winds start to pick up?
Well, I mean, yeah, the area from the eye down towards Cairns, so any side of the southern side of the system. And those are the winds that we're going to see. 120, 130, 140 kilometers per hour. These are destructive winds that are going to take down trees. We've already seen lots of trees down in the area through the day today.
All right. Thank you, Bradlyn. I really do appreciate it. We'll, of course, see you on Sky News Weather.
Thanks, Val.
Joining us now, our favourite person to talk to each and every week, the great Megan Kelly. Lovely to see you, mate. Some craziness in the States as always, including these idiot college presidents, the ones who have been very clear that they hate all forms of discrimination, but they're kind of cool with Jew hatred. And on your show today, I love that you went to a place I can't go, which is you've had enough of woke women.
Oh, my gosh. All three of these ladies are products of DEI hiring. There's no question. There was a wave of incoming for we've got to get women of color to run these universities. Well, that would have been fine if they had been qualified, but very clearly they aren't. There was a time in the not so distant past where we had, yes, it tended to be men. It wasn't always, but smart people who cared about high academics and rigor and honesty and ethics who would get these positions after a long, long period of proving themselves. That is not what's happening here. These are DEI hires. Claudine Gay is a black woman. Yay, yay. And that got her this position. And if you look back at her writings over the course of her career, they've always been about one thing: race. Race. And that's how you get to be the president of Harvard University in modern day America. I mean, she did race as her dissertation. She talked about race down in Brazil. What if you're like a little bit black and a little bit white and you live in Brazil? Are you Afro? This is her writing. This is how she spent her life thinking and musing when it comes to academia. You know what that makes you? The president of Harvard. So is anybody shocked that, like the rest of these woke losers who are on the streets protesting for the Intifada and for death to Israel, she sees that conflict unfolding right now, I believe, as oppressor and oppressed. And even though the Palestinians and Hamas launched the attack on Israel, they have brown skin, so they're the oppressed. That's what I believe led to her ridiculous testimony in front of Capitol Hill, which for the first time in her life endorsed free speech. Do you know how many people she has kicked out of Harvard or punished at Harvard for their free speech? It doesn't matter whether you're black or white when it comes to this. You say something that offends Claudine, you're out of there. It doesn't matter whether you apologize, whether you were a kid who got admitted. and old texts came up and you said you were sorry because you were a kid, you're out. Claudine gives no quarter for anybody who says anything that comes up to the line when it comes to black people, for example, or policing in America. But the Jew hatred, well, we have a First Amendment, people. We have to live up to its principles. I don't make the rules. I'm just here to enforce them. Sure.
Who is the creep who is swimming with kids in Canada?
We talked about this guy. Was it last week, 2 weeks ago? We talked about this guy. There's more. He's at it again. He's a serial swimmer with 13-year-olds. He's part of a swim club that is for little girls. It's called the Otters Swim Club up in Ontario, Canada. His name is Nicholas Cepeda. He goes by Melody Wiseheart. I mean, it'd be funny if it weren't so disturbing. He's now, last time he was swimming with 13-year-olds, now he's been in the locker room at a meet involving 8-year-olds up to 16-year-olds, went into the locker room and changed with the little girls, observed and reported by Rebel News, who then found a little girl who confirmed she was in there and saw it, and that this is an intact male. No surgeries have been done. Not that that would help, but just for what it's worth. And so Melody would really like us to look the other way as he takes up a swim lane against these other little prepubescent girls. This is a sick, sick man. And the parents and the league and Canada are allowing it. Rebel News took out its camera to try to photograph this guy as they blew the whistles and they dove into the pool. And somebody came over to him, and I thought for sure this woman's going to say, "What are you photographing?" "Oh my God, there's a man. What do you mean, huh?" She was like, "Put down the camera. No videotaping allowed." Madam, you're focused on the wrong issue. There's a grown man in a bathing suit next to the 10-year-olds out there. For the love of God, somebody, I'm sick of how nice the Canadians are. You need somebody like me to get up there and sit poolside, and trust me, I will take care of him, and he will not be swimming down that pool lane. I would be in there like I was a drowning woman. Like, hello, help me. Nicholas Cepeda's in the lane. Get him at it. Something's going to have to change. This can't go on.
We love you. All right, our satellite time is about to be gone, so I just want to simply say this. It's my last time on the air for the rest of this year. We'll see you again next year. But, Megan, we love you from Australia. We love you, fire up, and I can't wait to talk in that big year of 2024 in the US. All the best to your family, darling.
Right back at you and to your beautiful audience. It's been a pleasure spending the year with you guys.
Late debate in a moment or two's time. Now, I'll be honest, I have no idea who are the people who complain about advertising, whether they've whinged about billboards or radio ads or TV ads. I don't understand how that's the thing. That's the hill on which you wish to, not quite die, but make a particular point on. Well, did you know that in terms of the ads that have been around in the country, more than 3,500 people have complained about all the different ads, including these TV ads that apparently, won't someone think of the children?
The rooster's calling. Let's roll.
What's the problem? Sheila's kissing in a... Okay. And someone stole chick. What is wrong with people? Honestly, to complain about that. I'm glad your life is that simple at times. Anyway, the late debate is on right now.